My husband kissed my forehead at the departure gate, told me to be strong for 2 years, and wheeled his suitcase toward security like he was headed to some big career dream. I stood there, crying hard enough that strangers gave me sympathetic looks. I even let my hands shake as I waved. It looked like heartbreak. But it was acting, because I wasn't watching my husband leave for a job. I was watching him walk straight into the life he'd been hiding from me, and I was letting him believe I was too soft to fight back. And stay till the end, because the twist that finally exposed the full truth didn't come from him. It came from the one person he trusted more than himself. My name is Harper Pennington. I'm 33, and I work as a title examiner at a small escrow office in a coastal town called Briar Haven. My whole job is reading between the lines of paperwork, finding the missing signatures, the dates that don't make sense, the accidents that look a lot like fraud. For 7 years, I thought I had a stable marriage to Mason Dunlap. Not flashy, not perfect, but stable. Mason always acted like stability was the prize. A good paycheck, a quiet house, a routine where you stop trying to impress each other and just exist together. We had our little place on Juniper Row, a 3-bedroom ranch with an old porch swing and a tree in the front yard that dropped leaves like it had a personal grudge. I found that house. I negotiated the price down. I handled every document like it was a client file. And I put my trust in him the same way I signed that mortgage paperwork, carefully, confidently, thinking I knew what I was agreeing to. I didn't. 8 weeks before that airport goodbye, Mason came home with that rare spark in his eyes, the one he used to have when we first met. He said his company had offered him a 2-year assignment in a big city up north. Bigger projects, better pay, a promotion track. The kind of opportunity he'd be stupid to refuse. I remember how proud I felt for him. I remember how I tried to hide my fear behind practical questions. How often would we visit? Where would he stay? Would they cover travel? He had answers for everything, and that should have been my first warning. Because Mason wasn't the kind of man who prepared answers. Mason was the kind of man who forgot we were out of dish soap until I put it on the grocery list. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how easily I believed him. 2 weeks before his departure, I did something so normal it still makes me mad. I was alone in the kitchen, wanting to print a recipe for dinner. My phone was charging, so I grabbed Mason's laptop from the counter. It was open, just asleep. I tapped the trackpad and waited for the screen to wake. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was just hungry. What happened next changed everything. A browser window popped up with a rental listing. Not a hotel, not a short-term corporate studio. A full, long-lease apartment listing for a 2-bedroom place in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The move-in date matched Mason's assignment start date. My throat went dry, so fast it felt like I'd swallowed paper. Then I saw the second tab. An email thread, still open, with a name that didn't belong in my marriage. Cleo Marchetti. The subject line had a little heart symbol in it, like whoever typed it didn't even respect the concept of shame. And the email wasn't vague. It wasn't a flirty joke. It was domestic. It was planning. It was 2 people choosing furniture, talking about towels, laughing about finally not having to hide anymore. I didn't see it coming, not like this. I remember staring at the screen and realizing my hands were cold. Not nervous cold. Shock cold. Like my body had decided it didn't want to participate in the moment. For a full minute, I couldn't move. Then my training kicked in. I examine documents for a living. I know how people lie when they think paperwork will protect them. And I know one thing for sure. The person who panics first loses. So I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him. I screenshotted everything, listing, dates, names, messages, and sent it to myself. Then I closed the tabs, put the laptop back exactly how I found it, and pulled up a recipe page like nothing happened. That night, Mason came home smelling like aftershave and confidence. He hugged me, asked what was for dinner, and acted like he wasn't actively replacing me in his future plans. I served him food with a calm smile that felt like it belonged on someone else's face. And while he ate, I made a decision. I was going to let him think I was the wife he could fool. Long enough to win. Over the next 14 days, I became two people. On the outside, I was the supportive spouse. I asked him if he'd packed enough socks. I helped him sort his work papers. I reminded him to text me when he landed. On the inside, I was a machine. I opened a new personal account at a local credit union under my name only. I gathered statements. I printed copies of every deposit I could trace, especially the money my grandmother had left me, the inheritance I'd foolishly merged into our joint savings because I believed marriage meant safety. My grandmother, Irene Pennington, used to say, "Love is sweet, but signatures are permanent." I should have listened. I also called Tess Calloway, my best friend and coworker, the only person I trusted enough not to crumble in front of. I didn't tell her everything at first. I just said, "I need you to trust me for 2 weeks and not ask questions." Tess looked at my face and didn't push. She just nodded and said, "Okay, I'm here." That's what real loyalty looks like. Then I booked a consultation with Nadine Ulrich, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being calm in a storm. Nadine didn't try to hype me up. She didn't tell me I deserved better in a sing-song voice. She asked questions. She asked for dates. She asked for proof. And when I showed her the screenshots, she leaned back and said, "You're going to want to move carefully, but you're not powerless." Those words mattered more than I expected. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt your heart, it messes with your sense of reality. It makes you question whether you were ever smart at all. Nadine reminded me I was. Then came the airport morning. Mason and I drove to Briar Haven Regional Airport in silence, dressed up as small talk. He held my hand like a husband. He joked about airport coffee. He told me 2 years would go fast. When we reached the gate, he hugged me tight, like he was practicing for an audience. I let my tears fall. I let my chin tremble. I let him think he'd broken me in the sweet, romantic way men imagine when they think they're the main character. He rolled his suitcase away. He turned once and mouthed, "I love you." I mouthed it back. And if anyone watching thought I was devastated, good. Because the real performance started the moment he disappeared behind security. I walked straight out of that terminal, got into my car, and drove to Tidecrest Federal Credit Union. I didn't go home. I didn't sit in my empty kitchen and sob like he expected. I went to the one place that could decide whether I'd be trapped or free. Inside, I sat with a banker named Patricia, a woman with neat nails and a voice like soft paper. I told her I needed to move funds from a joint account into a personal one. She looked at me for confirmation. "You're an authorized holder." I nodded. "Amount?" "All of it," I said, steady. $375,000. Patricia didn't flinch. She just clicked keys and asked me to confirm. It took less than 20 minutes. 20 minutes to remove the future he planned to steal. When the transfer cleared, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long time, waiting to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt quiet. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't know until I finally exhaled. But that wasn't the worst part. Because the money wasn't the only thing Mason had been planning to take. From the parking lot, I called Nadine and told her it was done. She said, "Good, next step we file." That afternoon, I signed divorce papers in a small office with beige walls and a ticking clock. Nadine filed a petition, plus an emergency request to protect assets. She also gave me a name for a private investigator. Vic Delmonico. I hired him the same day. I sent him the rental listing, Cleo's name, and Mason's travel details. Vic didn't react the way people in movies react. No dramatic gasp, no pity. He just said, "Got it, I'll start tomorrow." When I finally returned home, the house felt like a stage after the actors leave. Too quiet, too normal. I stood in our hallway and realized I didn't know who I'd been married to. That night, Mason called me from the city. He sounded upbeat, relaxed, like a man settling into a dream. He told me the apartment was small but fine. He told me the team seemed great. He told me he missed me already. Every word was a lie. I smiled into the phone anyway and said, "I miss you too." Then I ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, feeling like I was swallowing nails with every breath. I started recording our calls after that. In my state, that was legal as long as one person on the call consented. And I did. If Mason wanted to lie, I was going to let him lie into a microphone. A week later, Vic sent his first update. Photos. Mason and Cleo walking into the apartment building together. Mason carrying grocery bags. Mason laughing like he didn't have a wife in a house that still smelled like his detergent. The intercom label had both names. Not visitor. Not guest. Both names. He lived there. And then Vic added a line that made my stomach drop. Harper, I checked his work story. I stared at my phone. Vic said, his company doesn't list him. His license isn't current. I called around. He hasn't worked there in months. I felt my heart pound once, hard, like it was trying to break a rib to escape. Mason wasn't just cheating. He wasn't even employed. The entire 2-year assignment was a cover. And suddenly, the last 5 months of our marriage replayed in my head like a corrupted video. The mornings he left early. The afternoons he came home tired. The vague complaints about coworkers whose names he never said. He'd been acting unemployed like it was a full-time job. I thought I'd already hit the bottom. I hadn't. A few days later, my office phone rang. The caller introduced himself as Christian Ainsley, a manager from Mason's former firm. He asked for Mason. I kept my voice polite. He's away on assignment. Is everything okay? There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone deciding how to be honest without sounding cruel. Then Christian said, "Ma'am, Mason hasn't been with us for a while. We've been trying to get company equipment back. We thought you might know how to reach him." I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to sit on them. 5 months. Mason had been pretending to go to work for 5 months. And I hadn't noticed. That's the part people don't understand about betrayal. It doesn't always happen in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it happens in routine, in familiarity, in the way you trust someone enough to stop checking. That week, I also called Corinne Dunlap, Mason's mother, because I needed to keep appearances. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her careless. Corinne talked too sweetly, like she'd been waiting for this call. I mentioned Mason was settling in. Corinne laughed and said, "Well, at least he is close to that big park. He always liked that." I froze. I had never mentioned a park. Mason's fake story didn't include one, but the neighborhood from the rental listing. It sat right beside a huge park people talked about like a landmark. Corinne caught herself and stumbled into a different sentence, pretending she hadn't said anything. But I heard it. And in that moment, a new betrayal slid into place. Corinne knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to smile at me across holiday dinners, while her son planned a new life in another woman's apartment. I didn't confront her. I didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd slipped. I just filed it away, same as everything else. Evidence. Tess came over that weekend with takeout and 2 bottles of wine, took one look at my face and said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her about the email, the apartment, the fake job, the calls, the mother-in-law's slip. Tess listened, quiet for once. Then she said, "He really thought you'd just wait." I swallowed hard. I think he thought I'd beg. Tess leaned forward. "Then don't. Make him watch you walk away without crawling." Her words didn't fix anything, but they gave me something solid to stand on. A few days later, I found something in Mason's home office that turned my anger into ice. I wasn't even looking for it at first. I was looking for a copy of our homeowner's policy, just in case Nadine needed it. In the back of a file drawer, I found a letter from a bank I'd never used, stamped DCLINED. It was for a home equity line of credit. $150,000. Against our house. With both names on it. And my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I did what I do professionally. I compared it to real signatures. I looked at the letter shapes, the pressure, the slant. It was close enough to fool someone who didn't care. But it was wrong enough to prove intent. Mason had forged my name. He had tried to pull debt against our home without telling me. And if the bank's verification process hadn't caught it, we would have been drowning in a loan I never agreed to. This wasn't just a husband cheating. This was a man planning an exit strategy funded by my life. I called Nadine and read her the details. She went quiet, and that silence scared me more than her anger would have. Then she said, very calmly, "Harper, this changes everything. This shows planning. It shows financial deception. It gives us leverage." My throat tightened. "Is it serious?" "It's serious," she said, "and it's exactly why you moved fast." But even with all that, I still didn't reveal my revenge early. Because I knew Mason. The moment he realized he'd lost control, he would become someone uglier than I'd ever seen. So I kept answering his calls, keeping my voice soft, like a wife waiting patiently. And every time he lied, I let him. Because every lie became another brick in the case. By week 5, his calls changed. Shorter. Less affectionate. More rushed. He stopped saying, "I love you," the way he used to. Not because he felt guilty, because his new life was getting expensive. And he was running out of money. I could feel it coming, like thunder you hear before the rain hits. Then it happened. One Tuesday night, Mason tried to access our joint savings. He had waited 5 weeks without checking it, probably because he thought I'd never touch it. Probably because he thought the money was already his. But when he opened the account and saw 0, his fantasy cracked. My phone lit up with missed calls. One after another after another. Texts followed. "Harper, answer. What did you do? This isn't funny. Pick up right now." I watched the screen like it was someone else's life, like the chaos belonged to a stranger. And I didn't answer. Not yet. Because Nadine told me the moment Mason panicked was the moment we had to move. That night I called Nadine and said, "He knows." She said, "Good, tomorrow he gets served." The next morning, a process server met Mason at the apartment building where he lived with Cleo. Vic was nearby to document it. Mason opened the door expecting something ordinary. Instead, he received a thick envelope that quietly rearranged his entire life. 2 hours later, Mason finally got through to me. I answered on purpose this time. His voice was a storm, angry, shaky, desperate. He said I had no right. He said I was stealing. He said I was ruining everything. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "You should speak to your attorney." He snapped, "I need that money, Harper." I paused. "For what?" He exploded. "For rent, for bills. Do you understand that? I need it." And there it was. Not our future. Not our retirement. Not even our mortgage. Rent. For the apartment he shared with Cleo. The proof fell out of his mouth like he couldn't stop it. He tried to backtrack, tried to say Cleo's name didn't matter, tried to pretend the apartment was temporary, tried to claim I was misinterpreting everything. But the recording got it all. I hung up and sent the audio to Nadine. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, Mason flew back to Briar Haven like he could storm into our house and intimidate me into obedience. He didn't come with flowers. He came with entitlement. He hired a cheap attorney and filed an emergency motion claiming I had to return the money, arguing it was a joint account. And here's the scariest part. Legally, he had a point. Joint ownership is messy. Judges don't love when someone drains an account, even when the reasons are good. For the first time in weeks, I felt fear. Not because I thought Mason deserved it, but because I knew how systems work when someone tells the better story. Nadine told me, let him try. The hearing was in a small county courtroom, not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a judge, two attorneys, and two people who used to share a life. Mason walked in looking confident, like he thought he could charm the room. Then Nadine slid the evidence forward. The inheritance documentation, tracing the largest portion of the savings back to Irene Pennington's estate. The investigator's proof of cohabitation with Cleo. The employment confirmation, showing Mason's assignment, was a lie. The recorded call, where he admitted the money was for rent. And finally, the denial letter for the home equity loan, complete with the forged signature. When the judge looked up, Mason's confidence was gone. His attorney tried to argue marital funds, tried to argue overreaction, tried to argue that I was being spiteful. But the forgery poisoned everything. Credibility matters in court, and Mason's credibility had just been shredded by his own handwriting. The judge denied Mason's motion. The money stayed protected while the divorce moved forward. Mason walked out of that courtroom with the kind of blank expression you get when you realize your own choices have built a cage around you. He didn't go back to the city right away. He checked into a cheap weekly motel on the edge of town, the kind with thin curtains and a vending machine that never works. And I thought, for a brief moment, that maybe that was the end. It was. Because while Mason was panicking in a motel room, two other people were making decisions that would crush what little control he had left. One was Cleo Marchetti. The other was Corinne Dunlap. Back in the city, Cleo started asking questions. Mason had told her he needed to handle a legal situation with an ex-wife. He promised he'd return quickly. He told her not to worry. But the rent was due. And his voice on the phone had changed. Cleo wasn't stupid. She worked in marketing, which means she knew how to research, how to verify, how to spot holes in a story. So she searched his name online. And within minutes, she found public records showing Mason wasn't divorced when they started seeing each other. He had a wife. Me. Cleo kept digging, and the story she found didn't match the man she'd moved in with. She found proof he didn't have the job he claimed. She found that the career success was mostly performance. Then, late one night, she messaged me. Not on social media, not where she could be dramatic. She found me through a professional profile. Her message was short and trembling, like she didn't know if she'd be attacked or believed. She introduced herself, she apologized, she said she didn't know. Then she wrote, "I think you should see what he told me." She attached screenshots. Months of messages from Mason promising his divorce was almost final, promising the house would be sold, promising he'd bring money soon, promising a clean, respectable future. I stared at those screenshots for a long time. Not because they surprised me, but because they confirmed something darker. Mason hadn't fallen into an affair. He had built a second life with a blueprint, and he planned to finance it using what I'd helped create. I forwarded everything to Nadine. Nadine's eyes sharpened the moment she read them. "This shows intent," she said. "This shows long-term deception. This helps us close the door." I didn't reply to Cleo, not because I hated her, but because I had nothing to say that wouldn't be contaminated by emotion. Sometimes silence is the cleanest boundary. Meanwhile, Corinne Dunlap was dealing with her own panic. Because when Nadine filed the documents including the forgery evidence, Corinne realized something important. If this turned into an investigation, people would ask questions. And if people asked questions, Corinne's name could surface as someone who knew Mason was lying. Corinne cared about one thing more than her son: her reputation. So Corinne did something that, even after everything, still stunned me. She called Nadine. Not to apologize. Not to admit wrongdoing. To protect herself. Karen offered a written statement saying she knew Mason wasn't going on a real assignment, that she knew he was moving in with another woman, that she helped him browse apartments, that she heard him talk about getting settled and figuring out the money later. She signed it, in ink. And just like that, Karen threw her own son under the bus before he could drag her down with him. When Mason called her, desperate for help, she refused. She said she couldn't be involved. She said he made his choices. And she said in a cold voice, "Don't come near my business. Do you understand me?" The man who thought he could control women like puzzle pieces suddenly had no woman left willing to protect him. Not his wife. Not his girlfriend. Not even his mother. The divorce didn't end with screaming. It ended in a conference room. Me and Nadine on one side, Mason and his attorney on the other. A pitcher of water nobody touched. A stack of documents that told the truth more clearly than any argument ever could. Nadine slid the folder across. The investigator's photos. The employment confirmation. The recorded call. The forgery denial letter. Cleo's screenshots. Karen's statement. Mason's attorney flipped through slowly, and I watched the color drain from Mason's face with every page. Not because he felt remorse. Because he understood math. He understood consequences. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering something I couldn't hear. His attorney whispered back, and Mason's shoulders slumped like a puppet whose strings were cut. The settlement was clean and final. The inheritance portion remained mine. The rest of the savings was divided in a way that reflected what the evidence proved: his deception, his attempted debt, and the money he'd already burned maintaining his lie. I kept the house on Juniper Row. Mason signed away his claim. Not because he suddenly wanted to be fair. Because he had no ground left to stand on. When he put the pen down, the room felt strangely quiet, like even the air was relieved. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I felt tired. A deep tired that comes from holding your own heart together while someone tries to tear it apart. Outside, Tess waited for me with 2 coffees, and that look best friends have when they're ready to fight anyone who hurt you. She didn't ask for details. She just handed me a cup and said, "Food, then sleep, then we rebuild." And for the first time in weeks, I laughed a real laugh. A few months later, I stood in my bedroom painting over the gray walls Mason picked years ago because he thought gray looked clean. I chose a soft green instead, the kind that makes a room feel like breath instead of stone. The house felt different. Not because of the paint. Because of what was gone. No boots by the door. No jacket on the hook. No laptop sitting, open like a secret waiting to be discovered. Just quiet. The good kind. I got a promotion at work. Not because my boss pitied me, but because I showed up every day and did my job even while my life was on fire. I opened a separate savings plan with automatic transfers, the kind of boring habit that builds safety slowly. And I adopted a scrappy 3-legged rescue dog named Hank, who somehow had more courage than the man I used to call my husband. Hank followed me from room to room like I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And maybe, in a way, I was. As for Mason, I'll keep it simple. He moved into a small rental on the edge of town. The city life with Cleo collapsed fast once money stopped flowing and truth showed up. Cleo disappeared from his life the same way she entered it, through a door he opened with lies. Karen stayed in her little world, pretending she'd done nothing wrong. Mason lost the story he tried to write. And I didn't have to destroy him. I just had to stop protecting him. One evening, months after everything ended, I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd opened that laptop and lost my innocence. Hank slept at my feet, twitching in a dream. The tree outside dropped leaves onto the porch like steady rain. And I thought about the woman at the airport. The one crying as she waved goodbye. That woman looked like she was breaking. But she was. She was choosing herself. That's the lesson I took from all of it. Love without honesty is just a contract someone else can exploit. Trust isn't a gift you hand out because you want peace. Trust is something people earn through consistent truth. And revenge doesn't have to be loud to be final. Sometimes the smartest revenge is quiet paperwork, good timing, and the courage to stop begging for someone who already decided to leave. If this story hit you in the chest, do me a small favor. Like the video, subscribe for more emotional betrayal and justice stories, and comment below what you would have done if you found that laptop tab open on the counter.